Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody here this morning to the March 5th, 2024 AM Board of Supervisors meeting. At this time, if you're able, please stand for our invocation. We welcome Pastor Brad Hales from Reformation Lutheran Church, and he's going to lead us in our invocation.
Let's go ahead and pray. Father in heaven, I do thank you and praise you so much for this day, and I'm very grateful for Culpeper County. What a blessed place to live, Lord God, and we are so thankful for that opportunity. I pray for our Board of Supervisors. I pray for our constitutional officers. I pray for all who work for the county. Bless them, keep them in your loving care, anoint them, Holy Spirit, and give them direction and guidance to serve the people and do the best for Culpeper County. I pray all these things in the name of our Savior alone, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Hales. This time I'd ask Supervisor Deal to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll now call to order the meeting. Want to make sure that Supervisor Durr, who's not able to be with us today, has joined us electronically. Can you hear us, Supervisor Durr?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Moving on, the first order of business is we have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Here. The agenda is approved as presented. First order, item 2.02 is our consent agenda. At this time, I'll turn it over to our County Administrator, John Eggertson, to brief the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. We have several items on consent this morning. Under item A, the board will consider approval of the minutes from the February 6th, 2024 AM and PM meetings. Under item B, the board will consider approval of a resolution to recognize employees of the Department of Social Services for their recent extraordinary efforts in providing care for a specific client. Under item C, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and a budget amendment in the amount of $5,000 for the Sheriff's Office. Under item D, the board will consider acceptance of a grant and appropriation of the funds in the amount of $1,211 for the Sheriff's Office. These funds are from the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice. Under item E, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and a budget amendment in the amount of $2,500. The funds are from the Culpeper Eagles for the Sheriff's Cadet Program. And under item F, the board will consider acceptance of a grant and appropriation of the funds in the amount of $21,381.50. The funds are from the Library of Virginia for the Clerk of the Circuit Court.
Thank you, John. Do I hear a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Item 3.0, General County Business. The board will recognize Culpeper County employees with the number of years of service. John?
Mr. Chairman, I'll kick this off. This is the one time a year when we like to recognize employees who have reached certain milestones in their careers with Culpeper County. In the interest of time, we're going to go through these and read the names, and if you're here, stand up and wave your arms if you like, but we won't call everybody up individually. You'll get certificates and the rewards that go with it after the fact from HR. There's 52 employees this morning that I'm going to read, and all told, combined, they have 670 years of service with the county, so I think that's pretty great. So without further ado, I'll start with those that have reached a 5-year milestone of service. Bryant Arrington, Sheriff's Office. Gary Bird, Environmental Services. Dale Christensen, Planning and Zoning. Taquan Cottums, Sheriff's Office. William Kropp, Building Department. Andrew DeNicola, Library. Blake Dodson, E911. Beth Gaynor, Library. Angela Kirby, Human Services and Head Start. Bruce Lee, Sheriff's Office. Amanda Long, Culpeper Youth Network. James Martinez, Environmental Services. Sochel McCauley, Building Office. Larry Moore, Sheriff's Office. Edwin Morales Guerra, Environmental Services. Greg Sargent, Animal Services. Wesley Spicer, Sheriff's Office. Dana Watson, Human Services. And Melody White, Sheriff's Office. Those are our 5-year employees. Moving on now to those with 10 years of service, Crystal Beadler, Human Services. Carter Bunch, Airport. Terry Graham, Sheriff's Office. Joey Jenkins, Sheriff's Office. Dana Randall, Youth Network. Bailey Thomas, Human Services. Sylvia Wetzel, E911. And Brian Ziering, Emergency Services. Having reached 15 years of service, Robert Horning, Animal Services. Melanie Jacobs, Emergency Services. Bill Uten, Emergency Services. Owen Gore, Sheriff's Office. Joe Paragori, Emergency Services. Robert Peters, Sheriff's Office. Mary Rowland, Human Services. Nathan Sellers, Emergency Services. And Denise Wetzel, Commissioner of Revenue. And with 20 years of service, Kathy Gigliotti, Human Services. Jackie Howington, Emergency Services. Nate Jasper, Sheriff's Office. Teresa Jenkins, Human Services. Sue Johnson, Human Services. Vicki Martinez, Human Services. Donna Mickey, Human Services. Wilma Morales, Human Services. And Rachel Palmer, Human Services. And at 25 years, Jeannie Chapman, Human Services. Tony Garnett, Finance. John Gregg, Animal Services. Debbie Hoffman, County Administration. William Martin, E911. And Calvert Payne, Human Services. And we have one employee this morning that has reached the 30-year mark, and that is Pam Searles with Human Services.
John, thank you.
Thank you to all of you very much.
And then from myself and the entire board, we can't thank you guys enough for what you do on a daily basis. If it weren't for you, Culpeper government wouldn't be what it is today. So thank you so much for your help. Moving on to item 3.02, the board will receive an update from John Christensen, Executive Director of the Museum of Culpeper History, regarding their historic marker program.
John, there is a clicker, I think, that the clerk has, so you can go through. Mr. Christensen asked to come and speak with us this morning. You might recall that beginning in the current fiscal year with the adoption of the budget last year, that we did include some funds for the museum to implement this program, and excited to hear that it's going well. So, John?
Is there a direction I should click this or over there? I will figure it out as we go along. But good morning, everyone, and thanks for your time this morning. Promise I won't take very long. I'm joined by our board president, Elizabeth Hutchins, and our board vice president, Andrew Gutowski. And as Mr. Eggertson said, we just wanted to give you an update on our progress report on what we're doing with this historic marker fund program that you were kind enough to fund us with this past year. Okay. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about in terms of historic markers, you might be familiar with Virginia's state historic marker. These are the metal roadside signs that you might see as you're traveling along Virginia's highways and byways. This is a state program. It was started in 1927. It's currently administered by the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. And just to put it in a little context, Virginia was part of those, or excuse me, Culpeper was part of those initial 1927 historic markers. So there were a number of markers put in Culpeper County as part of that program. In addition to the state program, a number of local municipalities and counties have a local historic marker program. For example, Prince William County has a local historic marker program. And these are to recognize sites and events of more local interest. And so that is what the program that we are doing is about, sites of Culpeper interest. And this is the state DHR still keeps track of and approves all of these local marker programs to make sure that no one is stepping on anybody else's toes and that sort of thing. So this has been vetted by the state. They're aware of what we're doing, and we have their approval to move forward. Again, we applied for $10,000 as part of the current fiscal year to begin this marker program. We asked for funding for 3 markers, and we raised some additional funding for a 4th marker. Our committee in proposing, developing these markers included museum staff, members of our board, as well as community volunteers. We have gotten permission from the property owners to place these markers on their properties. We've gotten insurance to cover these markers in case of accident. And what are these markers going to be? The first marker that we intend putting up is to mark Norman's Grocery up on Route 522. That is a small African-American business that has been in operation for over 130 years. And that's certainly a significant achievement, and we wanted to mark that. We'll also be recognizing the community of Rixieville and the contributions of the Rixie family to Culpeper County over the years. We will be recognizing the location of the first courthouse just down the street where Pepperberry's is. And that's significant because of the role played in there during events leading up to the American Revolution, what with the Stamp Act protest in the Culpeper Resolves in 1774. And then finally, we'll be marking location the encampment site of Lafayette's march through Culpeper in 1781 as part of the American Revolution before he went down to Yorktown. And just to kind of give you an idea as the geographical distribution of where these are going, we are distributing these around the county and not centering them in any particular locality. We've gotten a little bit of publicity about this. We had a nice above-the-fold article in the Culpeper Star Exponent last month. And this is what they're going to look like. So we've got a distinct color scheme from the state markers, so there won't be any confusion about, between these and the state highway markers. They will have the museum's logo, the date they went up, and then you might notice in the corner there will be a QR code that will link to our website where people can pull up additional information on these sites, things like documents, photographs, and that sort of material. Again, I mentioned the color, the QR code, and right now we're anticipating that we will have a ceremony unveiling the Norman's Grocery marker on April 20th, and we hope you all will be able to come to that. And again, moving forward, we've applied for another $10,000 in the next fiscal year to continue this project, should you feel that this is worth supporting. And we anticipate doing at least 3 markers a year until we run out of things to talk about. So if you all have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to commend Mr. Christensen and the museum board for this, for their terrific work on this project. They've really worked hard at it. The markers really are beautiful. They're going to be a terrific addition to our county and for our citizens and for anybody who comes in from out of the county. It's a terrific program. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to item 4.0, there is no old business. Under new business, item 5.01, the board will consider authorizing the chairman to co-sign a letter with the chairman of the Human Services Board urging the Commonwealth of Virginia to address the issue of residential services having to be provided by Culpeper Human Services. And at this time, I'll turn this over to our county administrator, Mr. Eggerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know that you all are familiar with the issue at hand, and Lisa Peacock had spoken to you about it some during her budget presentation last month, but we have recently experienced this situation where we had to provide residential services for one of the people who had been left in the care of social services, and that had to occur within the social services offices, which was not ideal, and was costly and a burden on the workers as well. This is a state problem, we think, based on the fact that there's not enough public locations to help serve these youth. And there was a letter posted on board docs from Pastor Hales, who's the chair of the Human Services Board, to Chairman Bates, asking that we join them in writing to the governor and bringing this problem to light. So there is additionally a draft letter to be jointly signed by Reverend Hales and Mr. Bates to send to the governor if the board sees fit to do so. And Lisa, I don't know if you had anything to add, but the draft did come primarily from Lisa and Human Services. I think it was put together very well, and hopefully will shine some light on this problem.
Questions or comments?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? I will just say, I hope this letter reaches some ears in Richmond and we can get something done, because this is a dire situation. And I thank you guys for what you've done in the past for this one particular young man, but we need to get something done for sure. So with that said, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. At this time, we will move on to our committee reports. First up will be our Public Works Committee.
No action items.
Thank you. Next is our Building and Grounds Committee, Supervisor Durr.
Mr. Chairman, Building and Grounds brings forward a motion that the board authorize staff to move forward with the construction of a trolley stop shelter at the sports complex.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? John, you need to elaborate on that, or Brian Rothmel, does he want to brief the board briefly on that?
Just real brief, we would like to put a permanent shelter at the field house. It would be located in the corner of the parking lot, which would be equidistant to the field house or the proposed pool. This would be, we would apply, I would send a letter to VTR, who is our operator of the trolley, and we would be responsible for a 4% match, which would be up to $600. However, staff will be handling construction of it, and we have $30,000 excess in the fund because the trolley did not, the third route did not start till December.
Questions for Brian? No? Thank you, Brian. With that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to our Rules Committee, Supervisor Gugino.
The committee brings forth a motion that the board refer to the Planning Commission of potential amendments to the zoning ordinance. The amendments would better define public utilities and would require a conditional use permit in any zoning district for utilities such as electrical substations.
We have a motion. We have a motion and a second. Discussion? I'd like to ask Sam McLaren if he could elaborate on this a little bit.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Yes, this is staff work with the Rules Committee to develop some potential zoning ordinance changes to specifically public utilities, the definition of public utility, what that is. And it would involve several sections of the zoning ordinance, including your definition section, and then potentially the A1 all the way up through your industrial zoning. Currently, public utilities are addressed different ways in different zoning districts. This would unify how the board potentially could review and treat public utilities, including the potential review if this code amendment goes forward as proposed. Currently, electric substation would require a conditional use permit in any zoning district, unless previously approved through some type of zoning action like a rezoning. Happy to answer any questions. Planning Commission would be charged to make a review per state code, and then it would make its way back up to the board.
Thank you, Sam. Questions?
No questions, just a comment. I'm going to be voting against the measure just because I don't believe in further restricting property owners and tightening zoning.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's 6-1.
All right.
Mr. Dino?
B, the committee brings forward a motion to the board for the board to authorize the advertisement of a public hearing to consider a request for tax exempt status for personal property owned by the nonprofit organization known as Identity Culpeper.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interject here, now that there's a second on the floor. Mr. Russell had a couple of documents he still needed to provide for this application, and he asked for the matter to be deferred. My thought process is that you could go ahead and approve this motion to authorize an advertisement, but it may not be at the April meeting. It would be at whatever time Mr. Russell is prepared to go forward.
Because we don't have everything we need, maybe it makes sense to just withdraw the recommendation and wait till later.
Either way.
Yeah.
I think that would be the cleanest way to do that, to be honest.
If possible, yeah. But technically, we have something on the floor. Can it just be withdrawn? Or can the second be withdrawn?
I can withdraw that.
Dies without a second.
Okay.
There's no further action that would be needed on that.
All right, C, the committee brings forward a motion that potential amendment to the zoning ordinance that would require approval of conditional use permit for any residential development in a commercial district to be referred to the Planning Commission.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. And again, Sam, if you'd like to brief the board on this.
Good morning again. This staff worked with Rules Committee on this potential. It's another type of zoning ordinance amendment. This would impact the existing commercial zoning districts, of which there are 3. Currently, in each of those zoning districts, you can do a residential use in that commercial zoning as a sole project, for example. What this zoning amendment would propose to do is not allow that as a permitted or by right or a principal use, but require any type of residential project or use to go through a conditional use permit process to be approved. So it would take it from a by right principal use and put it under a conditional use for each of those zoning districts. And again, this, because it is a potential zoning text amendment, would need to be referred to the Planning Commission.
you, Sam. Questions for Sam?
No questions. I do have a comment. This goes forward with our work with the comprehensive plan and also bringing the commercial services within its original intent in the ordinance to kind of consolidate and review and address a lot of the discrepancies that are within the zoning ordinance as a whole, commercial being now and moving on to some of the other zoning ordinances as well.
Question, wondering how many parcels of, say, that would be big enough to be impacted, so say more than 5 acres, there are that are undeveloped that would be impacted by this?
Mr. Chairman, to Supervisor Underwood, we did post a map only, as you saw in board docs. It just shows the entire commercial array. We don't have a lot of parcels. We have the largest zoning district out of the 3 that would probably be the most impacted by this would be the CS zoning, of which there are 165 parcels currently, total 410 acres, out of which there are probably only a handful that are larger than 5 acres. There's some along Route 29, and then there's some towards Brandy Station, or another parcel towards Brandy Station.
I believe that don't have a site plan, there consists 6 parcels. The largest being David Martin and Brandy Station of 50 acres. There then being 3 parcels along Highway 29 that are roughly 8 to 10 acres each, of which I own one of the 3, of which JPS owns another, and it's a Self-Storage LLC is the 3rd, and then the Culpeper Ag Enterprises would be the other one that would be impacted. So, and when you look across all of those, I believe one parcel is greater acreage than all the other, isn't it? All combined?
The one parcel, yes, sir, the one parcel in Brandy Station is 50 acres. And that's not actually a separate parcel, but it's part of our greater tract that just happens to be a portion zoned 50 acres of CS.
Do we have any inkling or idea that any of these parcels could be looking at doing anything residentially?
Supervisor Underwood, the only way I can answer that is we're not currently reviewing any site plans for residential activity on any of those parcels. But there have been inquiries, about potential use for residential in those zoning districts. Yes, sir.
Have there been any other applications or requests relative to inquiries on any of those parcels that could potentially involve residential?
Not really, other than a zoning determination about whether the use would be allowed in that zoning district.
Okay. And so my concern is that there is one parcel that's 50 acres that the person has stated that they plan on doing residential. Now, they've also stated they plan on doing a data center. And they've requested a private sewer application relative to some state agencies, I believe. And for us to act right now when that's the only activity, and for us to also be acting contrary to what we're seeing at the state level, where there was state legislation proposed this year that would require residential in commercial areas. So I don't think this is a good idea.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, I'll piggyback on the property owned by David Martin. I don't know David Martin. I've said hello to him a couple times, but I'm hoping we're not targeting his property. And the thing is, he was in the tech zone down there to where he could develop that property for a data center. And I didn't want to see a data center down there. And I don't want to see a bunch of houses down there either on that property. But if we remove the tech center, the tech zone from that area to put it in a more inclusive area on McDevitt only, basically. And that was, I think, very smart. That's what we needed to do. but he got penalized because of that. And if we do this, we change an ordinance, and we're targeting him, which I don't know if we are, if we're not, but to me, are we open for a potential lawsuit? And I don't want to be a part of promoting a potential lawsuit that could be millions of dollars to our taxpayers. So unless we can figure out a way to grandfather that site in, I don't think I can support it either.
I don't think anybody's being targeted here. I think that ultimately when you put commercial in place, you put it in place for a reason. That's to have services there and to have that commercial base, which will help offset the taxes of residential. So allowing the ability to build residential where you're trying to build your tax base where residential is going to deplete it makes no sense to me. So I think it makes sense.
Well, I'd just like to say, Supervisor Gugino has mentioned, this has been in the talks and the works long before the property in Brandy came up with their comprehensive plan. Supervisor Underwood has indicated that the land on 29, that's where the other parcels are, and I'm going to go back to my original thought was, if it's commercial services, the intent of that zoning district is commercial. The way it's structured right now, everything that is under commercial services would be a by right use on that. And when we start talking about 8 houses per acre, I don't know that where the Boxwood house is on 29, and that property, that would be an ideal spot that close to a highway, a 4-lane highway, to have a bunch of residential. And that's something that could be done in this instance. And again, this is not targeting anyone. This, in my opinion, is good planning and preventing having houses right on the side of a 4-lane highway. And again, the primary intent of commercial services is commercial, and we're not saying that it can't be visited by the board. They can come forward for a conditional use permit to get the housing portion of it. But again, to have something by right, I don't support that under commercial. That's a,
Since you brought up the Boxwood house, I believe that did have some people living there for quite a while. In fact, I have several constituents who tell me what room they lived in there. And it was our Community Services Board decided that was an acceptable location to do that. So there has been a history of commercial use at that property. I'm not going to agree or disagree going forward, but I would note that has happened in the past, and that is the property that I happen to own there. That said, to me, we had it where there could be mixed use in that zone, meaning we've had it for I don't know how long, but a long time, where you could do residential and commercial. Outside of that instance, I'm unaware of another instance of that occurring or of us having a pending problem with that. I'm aware of, at least relative to the property I own, the opportunities, and the opportunities are more towards commercial, not residential. So that said, maximum flexibility makes sense to me. There's a reason that the state and others are looking at requiring residential in commercial. We were ahead of the curve, now we're going the other way. I'd hope we don't.
well, I might add that property that you speak of, when that was a hotel and restaurant, there was a lot less traffic count going on a single-lane road from there to Charlottesville when that was built. So I don't know we're comparing apples to apples, but again, I appreciate your input. Any further questions or comments for Sam? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's 5-2, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to item D, the committee brings forward a motion, I'm sorry, my apologies, Ms. Gugino.
You're used to being the chair.
Yeah, you go right ahead, my apologies.
No problem. The committee brings forward a motion that the board authorize the advertisement of a public hearing to consider amendment to the County Code, Chapter 12, Article 19, Sections 12 through 262 and 12 273. The amendment would allow for vendors to retain a 3% administrative commission on food and beverage tax collected and would clarify the section regarding interest and penalties.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All right. That said, we have a call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, E, the committee brings forward a motion that the board authorize staff to apply for a burn justice assistance grant to assist the sheriff's office. The grant will require a 25% match, which is available in the sheriff's budget.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? And moving on to our Personnel Committee, I'll let Supervisor Underwood introduce these items.
Sure, sir. We did have a committee bringing forward a motion that the board approve implementation of a second phase of the 2023 pay and classification study. The implementation is recommended on April 1st for the last quarter of fiscal year 24. Relative to that, I would note that there was a proposed amendment by me on the Personnel Committee that would adversely impact the amount for employees, and so staff went and did some work. And if possible, I would prefer that we do this with the staff's original recommendation. So I don't know if we do that either by dying without a second the motion with my way, or I don't know how we get there, but we need to go with what staff recommends.
Just amend your motion.
I'll amend my motion to follow staff's recommendation.
Okay, that was simple enough. We have a motion and a second, and I'm going to turn this over to John. He can elaborate a little bit.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. We had a study done last year, and subsequently to that, we adopted some new pay grades and pay ranges, and this is what would consider phase 2 of the implementation of that study, which would advance people into the proper point in that range based on the market that's out there. The factors that would determine how far an employee advances into the range would include years in the current position, years in other county positions, and the most recent performance score. And using those three factors in the formula that's been presented, there's a determination made about where in the range each employee would fall. I should point out that there are a large number, probably every bit of 50% of the employees that would not necessarily benefit at all from this, and others that are way behind market and would advance quite a bit. We did ask for this to be implemented for the last quarter of this year, and of course it would carry forward into the next fiscal year, along with our plans to include COLA and merit raises in the next budget, so that those who don't benefit from this would still see something come July 1st. So the cost of it is, including fringe benefits, about $865,000 annually. And we'll be having a work session later, but I think this is a price tag we can afford, and appreciate Mr. Underwood's motion.
Thank you, John. Questions for John?
Just to clarify, so the motion is for the original version, correct? Right, correct. Okay, thank you.
Further questions, comments? That's it. We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Next up, we'll move on to our Economic Development Director's Report, and we'll turn that over to Mr. Brian Rothnell.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to give you an update, some of the exciting projects that we have going on with Choose Culpeper Farms, which now has officially made it past its year mark. So looking at the strategic plan, we will hit all of the aspects of Goal 3, which is all based off of Choose Culpeper Farms. First, I want to talk about some highlights that we've been doing. The Department of Economic Development has reserved space in both papers every month to highlight farming operations, agricultural operations that we have in the county. They are also that will be posted on our website, the Choose Culpeper Farms website, as well as the Facebook page has been highlighting century farms that we have operating in the county. And the February 15th edition of the Star Exponent and the Culpeper Times both featured an editorial on Griffwood Farms, which was good to see. Tay, who's a tremendous supporter of what we've been doing, he does the antique tractors. He organizes the antique tractors that we see at Farm Tour at the Welcome Center. So really thankful for that, and really interesting story about Tay. It was in both papers. The next item that Winona's been working on, our business development coordinator, is a beverage trail. We were exploring how to get an agri-trail set up, looking at different options, and when meeting with a brewery and saying, we're working on this, their response was, we've already started. Could you help us? And they want to go as quickly as possible. So the original goal was to reward visitation if you could go to several of our beverage manufacturers. So there's 7, so if you go to 8, thank you. There are 8. If you go to 5 of them, you would get a prize, be it a souvenir glass is the proposal. One of them said, it's great that they would want to explore all, but it'd be really great if they explore all and come back more frequently, which we don't disagree. So to encourage repeat visitation, if you go to so many, you can get a glass. And if you go to so many a second time and increase that number, you could get additional things such as a hat or a shirt that the department would handle. All of our beverage manufacturers, all 8 of them, have agreed to join in, including the ones in the town. So we're targeting a quick release of this this month, as they are hoping to get this launched for their spring push, as people start coming out of winter and getting things going on with that. So we're planning on moving this forward every year, and we'll have something kind of different iterations. We are also looking at different types of trails. So this is kind of the first of the CCF trails. We're hoping to have other agricultural enterprises to encourage people to visit our agricultural producers. And a little addendum that happened yesterday that I wanted to bring to your attention. United Electric has announced that they are coming to Culpeper County. Their location is on Beverly Ford Road, and this will help them service their customers within this greater region of Northern Virginia and Central Virginia. They are a major electrical supplier for building and industrial trades. They work in 7 major areas: industrial automation, lighting, wire, cable, conduit, gear and control, data communications, electrical, mechanical, and energy solutions. When we met with their leadership team, there are times in my job where you meet with people and you try to get them to get Culpeper, and you try to this is how this works here. This is how you can best integrate. Meeting with them was one of those where it's like, we're going to be great partners. We're really excited for them to come. They've already toured CTAC. They're an employee-owned company, which is a little bit unique. They have internship programs, and they love everything that we're doing when it comes to workforce development, especially from the high school level. And moving on, I think that's going to be a great partnership. So their location, this is their building. People have been asking me for many months what that building was, and now we can say that's United Electric. They're located right there on Beverly Ford. That's all I have.
Thank you, Brian. Comments for Brian? I'll say the United Electric, that's probably, I mean, when we look at some of these businesses that are popping up, and one of them is on property that I had on Bradford Road, is the rental companies, and now we're looking at United Electric. Is any connection, you think, between that and the data center development that we're getting ready to see?
We are seeing, we've already started to see that. BTR also opened up a location in 2022 in the Lovers Lane area off of Cedar Run Church Road. You know, they do fiber installation. This is something that we are working very diligently on over the next year. Is the data centers are great, but we want to have a complete community employment, and we have a lot of need for people that service these type of things. So we're hoping to have more of that.
Well, thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate that. All right, next up is our administrator's report, and with that, I'll turn it over to County Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Don't have much this morning, just of note regarding budget. We have a work session immediately following this meeting, and an additional work session on March 14th at 4:30 p.m. That will be with the school board and Dr. Brads. And from there, we'll go to the April meeting looking for an advertisement for the budget and tax rates. So we're reaching the pinnacle now.
Thank you, John. Questions, comments? All right, we have no closed session business, so we will move over to item 10, our work session. And
Okay.
John, if you want to give us an overview.
Jump right into that. I'm gonna go through a short budget presentation, if I can get that up, Kim, and if you want to click it for me, that's fine, or
Your graphics in these presentations.
yeah, I could probably spruce them up a little more, I guess.
The black and white. We're even saving whatever it would be on the photo thing, so yeah.
Okay, well, this won't take a long time. The budgets have all now been reviewed, and on-board docs was a large document that Ms. Lamb put together with all the departmental requests, and the far right column is the county administrator's recommendation for each of those. Based on our current revenue projections, we did have some shortfall, and I'll get to that in a minute. Next slide, Kim. I did get some information from Dr. Brads, who's with us this morning, and the schools, I think, are fairly promising in terms of their ask this year, but again, we'll get more focused on that at the next work session on March 14th. And this is not final by any means, but currently the school's request would be approximately $232,000 higher than last year, which is less than a 1% increase from their current year budget. Again, it's an estimate that Dr. Brads has to make based on what he knows at the state level, which at this point is in somewhat disarray. The governor's budget was fairly slim, the Senate budget was fairly lucrative, and the House budget was somewhere in the middle. And I believe Dr. Brads' budget has been built on that House budget number for the time being. Some other potential costs in addition to the schools is the pay and classification study that we just approved coming out of personnel. That's an $865,000 price tag to cover the entire gamut. Next slide, Kim. Our draft CIP is complete at this point. Most of the projects, as we normally do, we'll do as kind of pay-as-you-go basis. So we take the funds for the CIP out of the general fund, and we aren't dependent upon creating new revenue for those one-time projects. I would note that Valerie has warned me the middle school renovation will show in this budget, even though we won't have debt service until the next budget. And that's a whopping number, so when I present my total budget number, I'll have to take that into account because it'll look very large based on that middle school project. But excluding that, the CIP is about $9.6 million that we would pull from our general fund. So what's the bottom line? That departmental budget I mentioned on almost the very first slide was about $208,000 short. With the $800,000 for the salary study and the school's additional request, we come up to about a $1.2 million shortfall in our revenue, which would equate to an increase from our current real estate rate of 46 cents to 48 cents. If you break that down, one of those pennies would be part of the fire and rescue levy because there are increases in the operational budgets of both our volunteers and our career staff. And so one of those pennies is really attributable to public safety. The other penny is general government. But the budget that I would plan to propose to you at this point in time, again, would have that 2-cent increase on real estate, and that's what I would be asking you to advertise come April. Of course, that's ultimately up to the board, but at least for advertising purposes, that's probably what I will be seeking at this point. I think that was the last slide, is that correct? So that's all I have on that, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions and hear discussion, but we did also, as part of this work session, have 2 of our constitutional officers that had not been previously scheduled that wanted to address the board on their budget requests.
It's just relative to that. One, for the real estate tax base, how much will real estate taxes grow organically without a change of a rate projected this year?
I have everything in there as flat. I can get with Jason over at the real estate office and ask him what he's seeing as far as growth, but right now what's built in is totally flat.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think there's quite a bit of growth that has been occurring. So if there's, even if it's only 400 grand or so, that kind of backs us up to 1 cent. So that's the reason I was asking the question. Is it possible to get that to 1 cent because we've got enough growth that's occurring that would make up the other part?
We'll make sure we follow up on that, Mr. Underwood.
Any other questions or comments? With that, is Carson, would you like to, clerk of the court, give a presentation?
How are you all doing? I don't want to start off on a negative note, but I just want to say one thing, that I didn't particularly care the way the budgets presentations were done this year. I didn't like the fact that most of the constitutionals were cut out of the regular, usually February work sessions, and I think it's important to hear from all of us because otherwise you don't know what's going on in each of their offices. And I think all of the constitutional officers and offices provide a great service to the public and the county of Culpeper, and to you all as well. So I would just appreciate if maybe next year we go back to how we used to do it, where everybody was heard. I'd also like to start out with talking about my office. Again, growth, growth, growth. We've heard it most morning. So Culpeper in our 16th Judicial Circuit has the highest criminal numbers of any of the other courts in our circuit. So we're at, of last year, 1,592 criminal cases. So to put that in sort of a perspective, I know everyone likes to always compare with Fauquier, which is not in our circuit, but similar of size. So they only had 966 criminal cases for 2023, and that represented for them a 66% increase. So ours were up 33% from the already high numbers from the previous year. So that's a huge amount. That's a huge workload. When you think about what we have to do, we have to file all that paperwork. We have to do every criminal court order, which is also something I wanted to get to, is that a clerk's office is not actually required, based on an AG's opinion, to do a criminal court order. Most clerk's offices do, but about a quarter don't. Of that quarter, Commonwealth's Attorney's Office prepares those criminal court orders. So I just want to point out that most clerk's offices, including this one, is providing a service which is not actually required. And I'm not going to say we're not going to do it, because then we'd have to figure out who's going to do them. And I like the way we do our orders, and I think we have sub-judges who come in from time to time, and they comment on how well they're prepared and laid out. So I also want to reiterate that my office collected from December of 22 through November of 23, collected and dispersed back to the county over $1.2 million. Excuse me. So in addition to that, the county receives over $400,000 in salary from the comp board. So I think when you couple that with what the comp board gives, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find another office that gets more bang for your buck. We're responsible for over 800 duties. The code lays out 800 duties for the clerk's office. Without the clerk's office, there would be no circuit court, period. It wouldn't be able to operate. You wouldn't be able to point to the deeds and land records that you've referenced in your presentations prior. You wouldn't be able to prove if you were married, prove if you were divorced. There's so many things that this office does that I feel like is not seen at times until someone has to come in the office, whether they're recording a deed or a land record, and then they can see the amount. I mean, I can't tell you how many people who have walked in the records room and said, wow, there's a lot in here. And there is. I mean, we have records back to 1749. And in the past 3 years that I've been clerk, we had the deeds scanned back to the 1980s. And now we have them all the way back to 1749. I've gotten almost every major land record scanned in that records room, including plats and will books. So I just wanted to point out that it provides a very valuable service to the county of Culpeper. And initially in my request, I asked for an additional $4,000 for each employee. So at a total of $44,000. After seeing the comp study, I spoke with the county administrator, and I just wanted a flat $8,000 total, just to kind of even out some things that I think should be evened out, because I think I could have asked for another position and it would have been warranted with our growth. It's immense. I mean, I can't put it into words. I know the judge requested a law clerk, which was recommended. So the amount of work that has been placed upon that office is almost unbelievable. I mean, I get in a little before 6:30 almost every day. I'm working 45 to 50 hours a week, which is not a lot if you're in EMS or rescue or something like that. But it's something that people may not think about for a clerk. And I just want people to know how important the office is, and I want my employees to see how important they are. And that's what my request was initially. And I know it's not being recommended, even the additional $8,000. I further asked for 2 of my positions to be regraded. I have a deputy clerk 1 position, which is the lowest position. And I think with the amount of volume in that office, there is no deputy clerk one anymore. There's nobody who may just scan some things in or may just assist in the records room every now and then. That person who's in that position not only does everything that everybody else does, because we have to, that person also does probate. So that's an additional duty. So the other position was administrative assistant, which was advertised as an admin assistant position, but it's only, I think, graded as a deputy clerk 3. I wanted it graded at a 107 under the current grade scale because it was advertised as such. It was there when Evergreen did their study. It was detailed out and yet still not done. And in fact, if you want to look at Fauquier, which I know everybody likes to compare, they have, I think, a total of 5 grades for their clerk's office. We only have 4. So I just wanted to speak to you all, and I appreciate everyone's effort, but I also want everyone to see that it's an important office. And we've done a lot of things over the past 3 years that have changed the office dramatically, from scanning all those records in, e-recording, paying court costs online. We've gone fileless, which I think if we were not the first, we were one of the first in our judicial circuit to go fileless. So that means we don't maintain a paper file anymore. It's saving space, saving time. We've done so many things, and I just wanted to share that with you all. And I just hope and ask that maybe those requests that I made be considered by the full board. I don't want to lose good people, and I don't want to keep asking for more positions because I think they'd be warranted with those numbers. Like I said, we had 75 fewer criminal cases than Loudoun County. So that's a population of quadruple. So I just wanted to point those things out, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you letting me speak, and I think it's important. I wouldn't be here. I've been a little under the weather, but I came because I think it's important to share. So I appreciate it.
Mr. Beard, I'll say, we appreciate everything you and your office has done, and I want to commend you for getting everything, putting everything electronically. That was one of your campaign, I remember distinctly, that you wanted to see, put everything online, and seems like you've fulfilled your commitment there, and we greatly appreciate that. And I just don't want anybody to think that, you go unappreciated, because we know, the amount of work that your office does. I do have a question that I don't believe you'll be able to answer, but it just baffles me that why Culpeper County, when we compare to Albemarle, Loudoun, and all these surrounding counties, why do we have so many court cases, so much of it's just per capita, it just doesn't add up. I mean, it's...
You're right. I don't know if I can specifically answer that. I can give some theories. I can say that the population has increased. We are a centralized location, as you know. Good distance between Richmond and D.C. It's possible that our law enforcement arrest more as well than other localities. So I can't really speak for that, but I think when you see a growth like we have, coupled with our location, I think it's prime for those types of numbers. And I don't see them decreasing either. I only see them increasing.
Well, again, we thank you for everything you do. Thank you. Michelle?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'll try to be very brief. I will speak to something real quick about the history of salary studies. You know, as constitutional officers, you know, we're different. There was a time where the constitutional officer, as well as the staff, was not in line with, well, Mr. Rosenberger remembers this, were not part of the county's pay and classification study. That happened in 1998. There was also the implementation of the comprehensive planning team, which I served on that back in 2003, which really helped develop a lot of what happened, what is now known as your PMP, as well as the implementation of merit as opposed to across-the-board salary increases. I'll also speak to when those surveys are done, you know, they pick localities and they comp us with like salaries, trying to figure out what we're all called in constitutional officers between cities and counties and directors of finance. And even my own research, when it came time to research this study, and I know John has mentioned some are happy and some are unhappy, and the Personnel Committee is intimately aware of how I feel about portions of the study. But constitutional officer staff, they're compared with localities that some of which do have the same respect and parity for constitutional officer staff as far as salaries are concerned, but we're also compared with localities where that's not the case. They are not treated with the same parity as local, county, and so forth employees. But anyway, I will spare you. I was tempted to give you a lot of numbers to show where things have doubled in our office, but I'm sure if you look at the recap sheets, you can see that a lot of workload has terribly increased over the years for our office. And the last time that this board gave an additional position was when you implemented proration. Even though I asked for 2, you gave me 1. But there's a number of other programs that you guys have done since then. Your county attorney is getting a real workout on the request for tax exemptions. You know, that used to be handled by the General Assembly, and some of you all remember that glory got handed down to you locally. Well, I'm your first stop for that now. So instead of your General Assembly having to deal with all of those local requests for tax exemption by classification or designation, you all have the glory now. But hopefully you take some comfort in knowing that, you know, we deal with the applications, we review them, we research them, and then we may give recommendations to the county attorney's office. You know, there were years where we might have 1 or 2. Last year we had 7. There's things like, you know, you remember that the vehicle license fee, when everybody wanted to get rid of that dreaded windshield decal, including me, because, you know, you couldn't get it off and get the new one on. You know, that duty used to be a decal sales program for the treasurer's office, and that got changed over to a vehicle license assessment fee program for the Commissioner of Revenue's office. And, you know, back then we didn't, you know, we weren't afforded any additional staff. That has now been completely eliminated, and along with the towns. You know, you also implemented and I applaud you for this, for the alternative tax rate for your disabled veterans. You all came long ahead of the General Assembly's action for exemptions, so I applaud you in providing relief to the 100% service-connected disabled veterans. Believe it or not, we actually have had a couple that didn't quite meet the state's exemption for disabled veterans, and I shared, I think, not too long ago, that we had an individual that was without 1 arm, which is included in your favorable tax rate, your .0001 for disabled, but that person, for some reason, was not graded as service-connected, permanent, and total disabled. So, you know, we are serving, you know, our disabled veterans, and again, I applaud you for that. You know, of course, we have the fire and rescue program, which that has increased, and again, you know, I applaud you all for doing something at their request because, as you know, your Fire and Rescue Association president gives you a presentation routinely about how much money is saved as far as taxpayers and tax rates, because we do have a volunteer force. Well, those applications and that workload to provide that, that relief for the volunteers that give at least 180 hours, that's done by our office as well. And again, there was no additional employees. In your budget this time, as you remember when you just implemented food and beverage, and I'm a little behind the ball, so I'll take full credit for that. You all did agree, those of you that were present did agree to afford me that one additional position. And I hope that it is in the budget as recommended, and I hope you'll keep it there because we desperately need that position in order to move a little bit smoother forward. Unfortunately, I hadn't had the opportunity to ask for that, but we desperately need that position, so I hope that you will support that recommendation and support my request to add that position. One of the things that I'll share with you real quick is, business personal property. Your position, a lot of positions in local governments are to favor the growth of business because, there was a study done, I don't know, years ago where the expenses for residential far outweighs the expenses for commercial. 10 years ago, we had a little over 3,000 businesses. Today, we have over 6,000 businesses. And Supervisor Underwood, we talked about that. There is no electronic tool that's going to take all of that paper and voila, there's an assessment in our software program. It's actually all manual. And we've continued to do that. The standard for Virginia Association of Local Tax Auditors and Virginia Association of Assessing Officers is one person, one business personal property assessor per 1,500 business personal property manufacturing accounts. We've been operating with over 6,000 with 2 people. So hopefully that brings it home as far as that request is concerned. The next request that I've made in there is a slight adjustment to the salary for my chief deputy position. I know that you all are aware that there were some increases in certain, positions and leave payouts and bonuses and et cetera. Not all, it seemed like only one seemed to have been newsworthy, but in my research, there was more than one constitutional officer that did that. I'm not one of those. I've not inflated any employee's position over and above that which you all afford to county employees. So I hope you'll keep that in mind when you evaluate whether or not you are inclined to approve the request that I'm making. I've never done that. I don't use tax dollars to do bonuses out of my budget. I didn't even know that there was a leave program because back in the day, any employee that retired from our office, that leave payout had to come directly out of our salary line. And there was one early on in my stint as Commissioner of Revenue where we were without a key position for 4 months. So obviously things have changed, and I've evidently not done a very good job keeping up with some of that stuff. But again, I think many of you are very aware of the role of my chief deputy. I have submitted an updated job description to AMNI. I'll be happy to email all of that. And what I would ask is that if you can find time to take a look at job descriptions for grades and take a look at the job description for a chief deputy in a Commissioner of Revenue's office. A lot of times those positions are filled from the outside, probably because people in-house have better sense than to apply for them. But again, I hope that you will consider that, and anything that you want to ask me about that, I'll be happy to try to do the best I can to answer that. What I have done is basically ask for the slight increase that is in line with a like chief deputy position in another office. I'd like for mine to be treated fairly and equitably. And last but not least is me. So, for the first time in, I guess, by July 1, effective date for your across-the-board salary increases, if you find that the budget can support that. In almost 23 years as Commissioner of Revenue, I'm asking you to create parity for me. I'm asking for a fair and equitable salary. You know, there was a time where, and I mentioned that we served on the comprehensive planning team, and there was a time that this board included constitutional officers in their research for their study. And I think if you dig back long enough, you'll find that there was a time where 4 out of 5 of your constitutional officers, I believe, came back with a grade in line with your county administrator. And the highest was that of your Commonwealth attorney. Could have had something to do with college. But, you know, there were times, even up to 2003, when we served on that committee, that we were led to believe that we were going to be included. And when that study came back, fortunately, our staff was still included. They were included in '98. They've continued to be included since then. And I appreciate that, because I can tell you one thing, as Mr. Beard has alluded to, that if we were stuck with the state's comp board salary, none of us would have employees. None of us would. Back then, you know, when we served on that committee, me and another constitutional officer were told that our salaries would never fall below that of the finance director. And I'm sure if you look at the budget, you're going to see that has happened. And Mr. Underwood, I'm going to call you out for something. During the January 30th personnel, pardon? You are. During the January 30th Personnel Committee meeting, you made the comment that we need to compensate people based on how well you do in your job as opposed to how long you've been here. You followed up with, we need to reward those based on productivity, getting your money's worth. Supervisor Underwood and members of the board, here's your challenge. You're either going to tell me that I'm taking up space, or you're going to tell me that I've done a good job. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions for Michelle? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it.
Any other comments or questions? John, is that it?
That's all I had for today, Mr. Chairman.
When are we going to, I saw as part of our packet, we had the CIP in there also. Are we going to discuss that at another time or now, or when are we going to discuss that?
Normally we have Sam present that in detail. I guess that would be at our April meeting. Is that when we do it, Valerie? Yeah. We could add it to the work session with the schools on the 14th if it'd be helpful for the board to have it a little sooner.
I don't know. I just, at some point, I would love to understand some components of it.
Absolutely. It has been through the commission and it is ready, so, and it was attached to board docs this time, but we'll make sure you get that presentation sooner than later.
Was it attached thing?
All right, if there's no further comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.